Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Boy, it's been another crazy week. We went from hot weather to cold weather. We've had major storms, flash flooding, hail, the whole bit. That's spring in the South, but there is some good news to mix in with all of that. Everyone started talking about how Elon Musk had bought Twitter. I thought, well, I'll give it a try. Yeah, I know the deal's not done yet, and he may back out and all that. But suddenly, people are saying, hey, I'm back on Twitter and I'm not being censored. Now, honestly, I never found Twitter to be particularly useful. But I started an account, and if you want to follow me there, you can find me at Judson Carroll 1, JUDSONCARROLL number 1, and I'll follow you right back. Kind of interesting because I got on there and I did a search for anybody interested in herbs, and I sent a few friend requests, and I did a search for prepping and such as that. And within a few days, I had over 100 followers, which was pretty good. That it didn't happen last time I was on Twitter. But one of them is a guy that goes by the name of Prepper Dad. He got in touch, and apparently he had listened to my podcast, and he said, "Would you be interested in joining the Prepper Broadcasting Network?" Well, I had heard about it before. I checked it out a couple of times. I looked into it a little more, and I thought this looks like a really, this looks like a solid outfit. This looks like a good group of people. He put me in touch with the fellow that owns the network, and we had a great phone conversation. And he's asked me to come on board and do a podcast. This would be unique content. It's not my Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast, but this is going to be herbal medicine for preppers. I think it's going to start this next week, and we talked a lot about my technical situation here in the mountains. Basically, at my house, my only options for internet are DSL and HughesNet, satellite internet. Neither one of those are ideal for live internet broadcasting. I mean, it's going to cut out a lot. It's going to freeze up a lot. I mean, most of y'all probably haven't had DSL in 20 years or so, but it's gotten a little better, but it's still really pretty bad. And as far as cell phone coverage, I get maybe 2 hours of coverage a day. I don't know exactly why that is, but I can't get a call in or out most of the time unless I drive to town. I mean, I'm that far remote in the woods. I can hike to a ranger station, if I want to try that. But literally, and often the county seat, I can't even get cell phone coverage there. I have to drive to the county seat of the next county over. So I literally have to drive like 30, 40 miles round trip just to make a phone call sometimes. So, what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to start doing pre recorded short lessons, essentially. I'm going to talk about an herb. I'm going to talk about a way to use an herb. I'm going to talk about probably a lot of herbal first aid. I think that's always a good place to start out. Growing herbs, how to use herbs, same stuff we do here, but it'll be unique content and it'll be in a shorter format. So, that is prepperbroadcasting.com. Check it out. There's some really great content on there. Prepperbroadcasting.com. And hopefully you'll see me soon. He said he wants to feature some videos on there. And, it looks like it's a good team. And I think it's going to be a fun bunch of guys to work with. And I'm really looking forward to it. So, after I get this whole internet thing figured out, he said he'd like for me to do a long format live show. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Hopefully, we can have that figured out in the next few months. That will be an opportunity for you and the new audience I'm going to get through the Prepper Broadcasting Network to actually in real time ask me questions and I will answer. So that's going to be really interesting. It's a little different than what I've been doing, but I'm looking forward to it. So again, that's Prepper Broadcasting Network. Check it out and keep an eye out for when my new show, it's going to be Herbal Medicine for Preppers, debuts probably by mid next week. I think that's what we were talking about. If it is delayed for a week or something, just keep checking back. And if you want to find me on Twitter, at Judson Carroll 1, and I'll put an announcement on there, when things are live. And hey, it'd be great if I could start connecting with a lot of people through Twitter. Actually, let's have a presence on there that makes it worthwhile. There's a lot of nastiness on social media, and really Twitter has been about the worst next to Reddit. I mean, if you've ever been on Reddit, it's just people just cussing each other out all the time over nothing. I don't even understand why anybody would want to associate themselves with Reddit. It's crazy. And of course, Facebook is really at this point about the worst. Facebook is awful. Maybe who knows? Maybe somebody like Elon Musk will do some changes there, or who knows? But right now, I don't think Facebook is worth plug nickel, as they used to say. I wouldn't have anything to do with it unless it had some changes. You may remember I got banned from Facebook for being one of the first persons to say, so this virus came out of Wuhan, China. Isn't there also a biological weapons lab, like a block from the wet market where they say the virus came from, a virus that's never been known to cross species, but scientists have been doing gain of function research to make that happen? Hey, this seems a little fishy to me. I posted that and that was it. My account was shut down and locked, and I didn't go back. I mean, they locked me down, and that was before President Trump said anything about maybe it came from a lab. That was before any commentator said, hey, maybe it came from a lab. I was one of the first people to publicly state that, and I must have tripped some kind of algorithm, or they were just rabidly defensive of all things China and somebody was keeping an eye out for such content. But yeah, I'm done with them. And very similar thing happened on YouTube when I just made fun of Dr. Fauci. He reminded me his not only his the physical appearance, the way he speaks, his presentation of yogurt in the movie Spaceballs. Mel Brooks' character, remember? May the Schwartz be with you. Merchandising, merchandising. That's where the money is. So I had a little fun with that, and immediately they started banning and taking my stuff down. So who knows what's going to happen with Twitter? If they start doing that mess on there again, I'm out. But for right now, I'm having fun. I'm communicating with a lot of people. I think I got like 150 some followers in the first like 4 or 5 days, and people have been asking me questions, and there's still a lot of garbage on there. You just gotta have to avoid. But hey, it's better than it used to be. So I always think we should support somebody when they're doing the right thing. So things are looking up in a lot of regards. Things are getting better politically. Things are getting better in so many ways in this country. I feel very hopeful about things for the first time in a long time. Everything but the economy, which is headed straight into the toilet. Yet another reason why you need to learn herbal medicine because we're having supply chain disruptions. And let's face it, I mean, in a time of inflation, which is pretty darn close to tipping into recession and hyperinflation, you may not be able to afford to go to a doctor or afford to buy prescription medicines. The price of prescriptions is just going through the roof. If you have herbal medicine and you know how to use it, you can protect your budget. You can protect your family finances a lot more so than if you're dependent on a system that's crumbling, falling apart, imploding. So that's been that's my news update for the week. The only other thing really to mention is I dislocated my shoulder. Like I've said before, I'm a pretty tall guy. I'm 6'4", pretty solidly built, but I have loose joints. I've always been very limber. I've dislocated my shoulder several times. The worst time I was bench pressing. I used to lift weights a whole lot more than I do now. And, but my bench press was getting up there around 400 pounds, and I got a little cocky and, went in there and didn't have a spotter and got that bar up. And I believe it was my right shoulder that time, totally dislocated. The bar came crashing down on my chest, broke about 5 ribs, almost died, almost killed myself. Had the shoulder not gone and the weight went off balance. So basically, after the bar hit my chest, I rolled over and fell off the bench. I would have been crushed to death. I'm not always the smartest guy when it comes to such things. So I've dislocated my right shoulder about probably 4 times, and my left shoulder at least three. I've dislocated elbows, fingers. I've had my fingers turned around completely in the socket and broken in 3 or 4 places. I've dislocated my knee. I have old toes, all kinds. It's really started in junior high when I used to play rugby. I absolutely loved rugby. And if you've never played rugby, it is essentially football without the pads and helmets and 10 times rougher. You basically just kill the guy with the ball. And I loved it. And I would just, I'd get my arms ripped out of joint and bones broken. And for some reason, I mean, I just loved it. Now looking back, I think, why was I that stupid? But, honestly, if I was in that shape and that condition again, and I had a chance to play rugby again, with a team where I was pretty solidly matched against the other players, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. It is just like the most fun game for a guy like me. As an herbalist, what do I do when I dislocate a joint? I've talked about this before. You can treat a dislocation much as you would a sprain, a fracture, a mild break, a bad bruise, contusion, a deep bruise. First of all, of course, you have to pop the offending limb, whatever it is, back into joint. Which, yeah, if you ever saw that, was that Mel Gibson and Danny Glover movie? Everybody knows it's not coming to me right this second, where they play cops, and he had this gimmick where he'd pop his shoulder out of joint to get out of a straitjacket. Yeah, it really hurts that bad. I mean, it is blinding pain, drop to your knees, see stars for a while, and for the next week or two, you're going to be swollen and hurting, but it's not that big a deal. It's especially not that big a deal if we have a few herbs on hand that help a lot with those soft tissue injuries. The first is arnica. Arnica is the go-to. Arnica disperses bruising. It helps the swelling. It helps with the pain. You can essentially use it 2 ways. Now, arnica should not be used internally. Arnica is very caustic to the digestive system. It can be toxic. You just don't want to use it internally. There are some homeopathic remedies that use it internally. There are some herbal formulas that professional herbalists use that just have like, a tiny drop or two of arnica with some other herbs. For the home herbalist, the kitchen herbalist, look, just don't use arnica internally. This is Artica montana. That just means the arnica that grew in the mountains of Europe. I think there are some other varieties of arnica that are very similar to that. Arnica montana is the official one, the one that was used in monastic medicine. It's the one that would have been in the monasteries, apothecaries, and all that. You want to either make an oil of arnica. Now, in that case, you're using the dried flowers and you're putting it in a neutral oil, like olive oil. It can be any kind of oil, any kind of cooking oil, or whatever you want to use. And you want to keep it warm. That's it. You don't want to heat it up. You don't want to fry those herbs. You just want to slowly infuse that oil. If the flowers are perfectly dry, you can do this just by putting it in the oil and say sticking on top of your hot water heater or something. In a lot of the old herbalists in the German folk medicine tradition would put it in the sun. Now, some people say the sun degrades the medicinal property. I have no idea. I know that I basically will put a double boiler or a thick pot that's going to, have easy temperature control on a burner very low. I mean, to the point that I could stick my finger in there and it's not going to fry my skin. It's just, the lowest settings. A lot of people really prefer to use a low oven for this. They'll turn the oven on to the lowest setting when it gets up to temperature, turn it off, put the pot with the herbs in it in the oven and close the door and just walk away and leave it for 3, 4 hours. I mean, it works fine, or overnight, or whatever your specific recipe calls for. It varies by it doesn't vary so much by herb as it does the preference of the herbalist. But basically, we just want to infuse the medicinal properties of the dried herb in. Now, the only time you might want to use a hotter temperature is if the herb is not completely dry. Um, some people say that helps. Some people say it does no good at all, but some of the water will evaporate as the herb is infusing, and still that herb infused oil is not going to have as long a shelf life as if the herbs were completely dry, because any liquid in there can start to go rancid and can start to rot. The other way, which is really the way I use more often, is to make a liniment. I don't like dealing with a lot of oils. I don't like to have, I don't use lotions, I don't use creams, I don't like to have anything oily or slick or sticky on my skin. It just bugs me. I mean, I don't like it. I'm a guy, I have, dry skin and plenty of scars and a few wrinkles, and I'm okay with that. What I do is I would take the same dried herbs and essentially make a tincture. But as opposed to using a tincture in which we would use an alcohol, an ethyl alcohol that we would take internally, like vodka or Everclear or whatever you're using, I use rubbing alcohol. It's very always important when you make a liniment, label it and say non, you know, not to be used internally. You don't drink rubbing alcohol. Okay. I hope everybody knows that, but it's very, very, very bad for you. It's incredibly bad for you and quite toxic. Um, but infused herbs in there become a liniment that you can then rub into the skin. You can rub into the sore muscles. That is how I prefer to use herbs like arnica. It's easy, it's convenient. The alcohol evaporates on your skin. You don't have any greasy stickiness and all that. That will pull the swelling, the pain, the bruising out really better than anything. The next herb that's almost as good, really, is St. John's wort. And St. John's wort is traditionally made as an oil. The flowers, when picked nice and fresh and dried properly, turn the oil a reddish color. And it's very, St. John's wort is strongly soothing and healing. St. John's wort is particularly effective on the nerves. St. John's wort has been shown to help heal the nerves. It also soothes the nerves. So I would probably lean more toward a St. John's wort oil if I was using St. John's wort. I'm sure it could be made into a liniment as well. I often take St. John's wort internally. St. John's wort taken internally is antiviral, it's anti-inflammatory. It's particularly good to take during the winter because it actually increases serotonin levels a little bit. It can help with mild, moderate depression, especially that's caused by weather, winter blues, as they call it, or SAD, seasonal affective disorder. St. John's wort is just really good, and St. John's wort taken internally helps with a lot of inflammatory conditions and a lot of injuries, nerve pain. It's just, St. John's wort is one of the best go-to herbs. You should absolutely have both of these herbs growing in your garden. And you should also at least learn to identify St. John's wort in the wild because there's something like 30 species or so of St. John's wort that grow throughout North America. You can find St. John's wort if you look for it. I mean, if you're in even a slightly wild green area, you can find St. John's wort if you look for it. So that's how an herbalist responds to a soft tissue injury like that. Then there are herbs that help with pain, but honestly, I just grab some aspirin. This isn't as bad as it's been before. I'm not in agony. I obviously when I dropped the bar on my chest and broke ribs and everything, I was in agony. A large dose of valerian was about the only thing that could help me get to sleep. That's just one type of pain that we associate with this with soft tissue injuries. In that case, it was actually a broken bone injury. I have done a whole show on herbs that can be used for, muscle cramps and spasms, the antispasmodic herbs like skullcap and um, cramp bark or viburnum. That's a whole category of herbs that really don't have any strong use in a condition, such as this, a dislocated joint that's swollen. There are also some astringent herbs I can use, like as a soak or a poultice, or even taken internally, that would help kind of tonify the tissue, draw down the swelling. This isn't that big deal. 3, 4 days, my arm will be back to normal, and I can get started double digging some beds or working in the garden, which right now would be absolute agony, but it'll heal up pretty quickly. It's no big deal. So, y'all, let's get down to the herb I want to talk about this week. Now, this one is one of my absolute favorites. Now, I've said before, and if you've listened to my show for any period of time, you know I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to eat. So when I find it a great medicinal herb that is actually has strong medicinal powers, that is also one of my favorite foods, I get excited. That is very true about artichoke. Seriously, artichokes. Artichokes are in the thistle family. All the thistles we use medicinally have liver supportive properties. They're good for jaundice and hepatitis and all that. They're good for usually your gallbladder, um, kidneys, urinary tract. They help with digestion. You know, some of the some of the very best liver herbs are in the thistle family, like milk thistle, for instance. Most people know that Saliba marianum has been shown to have not only liver protective qualities, but to help regenerate damaged liver tissue in cases of, say, severe alcoholism. It's even the go-to remedy if you eat poison mushrooms. Even destroying angel, like one of the most, if not the most toxic amanita mushrooms you can find, is also one of the most common. It's a white mushroom, pops up after the rain, and if you eat it, it destroys your liver. It turns it into jelly. I mean, it just dissolves it. Well, in Germany, they've done studies that showed if someone who's eaten that mushroom, if they take a lot of milk thistle extract from the seeds, it's a standardized extract, it's what's used in most of these studies, it protected the liver. So that is super powerful. I mean, that is not to be, sneezed at or whatever the saying is. We are exposed to solvents on a daily basis. Solvents can be, yeah, alcohol. Alcohol is a solvent, right? But solvents can also be a lot of the cleaning fluids, a lot of the products that are in plastics, a lot of the soaps and detergents and all kinds of stuff that we're exposed to on a daily basis, petroleum products, etc. They soak in through the skin, and the liver has to deal with them. And or Tylenol, for instance, acetaminophen. In most European countries, acetaminophen is the main cause of liver damage and failure, not alcohol, which is pretty incredible considering that most European countries, the Europeans who live in those countries, drink more alcohol on a daily basis than most Americans. So think about that. Why do we not have warnings on the use of acetaminophen in North America? Well, acetaminophen's a petroleum byproduct, and between the pharmaceutical industry and the petroleum industry, you've got a lot of pressure on government agencies to say that acetaminophen is perfectly safe. So I would not be surprised if acetaminophen was the leading cause of liver failure in the United States as well. There's just absolutely no incentive for our government officials to declare that. Um, they make the researchers make money researching what makes the pharmaceutical companies and the chemical companies, et cetera, happy, and the government agencies work for politicians, which get their funds from large corporations, and we don't exactly have the best folks watching out for us all the time. So let's talk about artichoke. Now, artichoke is one of the oldest documented vegetables. Artichokes were so popular among the ancient Greeks and Romans, they were just crazy about them. It's kind of odd that artichoke is considered almost like a gourmet vegetable, right? I mean, you'll hear it spoken of highly in French cooking and Italian cooking. And if you go to the grocery store or wherever you go, artichokes are probably going to be one of the most expensive vegetables, which is kind of strange, really, because they're just the unopened flower of a thistle. They're not particularly hard to grow. They do need warmth. I'm just barely in an area where I can grow artichokes and their cousin cardoon. I have artichokes and cardoons. They're somewhat used interchangeably. The artichoke's sort of like a more refined version of the cardoon, whereas the cardoon, we really mainly eat the stem, peel the stem and eat it. The artichoke, we take off all those outer leaves and cut it back and pull out the choke, which is the thistle, and you're left with the base of the flower, really, and maybe a few of the tender leaves that just have a really good flavor that is so enhanced with butter and also crawfish meat. I think butter, crawfish, olive oil, garlic, you put that together, you got one of the best meals. Throw it together with some pasta, a little Parmesan cheese over the top. Wow. Wow. Okay. But let's talk about medicinally. All right. So plants for a future. Yeah, so the globe artichoke. Okay, it has become especially an important herb in recent years following the discovery of cynarin, the bitter tasting compound which is found in the leaves. It improves liver and gallbladder function, stimulates secretions of the digestive juices, especially bile, and lowers blood cholesterol levels. The leaves are anti-cholesterolemic. That means they lower cholesterol. That's a big word that just means helps reduce your cholesterol, blood cholesterol. Anti-rheumatic, that means it kind of helps reduce swelling of the joints, especially arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. Digestive, helps with digestion. Diuretic, hypoglycemic, which means it lowers blood sugar. Lymphantrific, which is another fancy word. It just means it helps get rid of or reduce the instances of kidney and bladder stones. They are used internally in the treatment of chronic liver and gallbladder diseases, jaundice, hepatitis, arteriosclerosis, and the early stages of late onset diabetes. The leaves are best harvested just before the plant flowers and can be used fresh or dried. So that would be making a tincture of those leaves or an infusion, a tea, a decoction, whatever you want to call it, of those leaves, as opposed to actually eating the artichoke, which I think is much more pleasant. And I think if you can grow some artichokes, you can have them part of your everyday or a few times a week diet. You can blanch and freeze or pickle the hearts, and you can have them through the winter. But yeah, take some of those outer leaves you would be cutting off and throwing away usually, and dry them and make a nice tincture out of them. And you get all the benefits of the artichoke. Often artichoke hearts are pickled or preserved in oil. So really, you can have them year round. And like I said, they just need some sun. They don't like a damp soil. They don't like to have wet feet. So if you got a sunny, dry area, I would say maybe zone six and above, USDA zone six and above. I think you could probably grow them as an annual zone five. You know, I mean, I would think so because they are perennial in very warm regions. But in cool, temperate zones, I can actually cut them down and when they die back in the fall and cover them with mulch. And some of them will come back up. So they're really not as tricky as a lot of people um, make them out to be. I've read articles that make the growing of artichokes sound like rocket science, but I really think that's just hype to keep the price up, you know, honestly. And there are different varieties of artichoke. Check some of the heirloom seed companies and such and see what might work for your area. And, you know, worst case scenarios, you're going to sow your seeds in the spring and your plants will die back in the fall. And you still had several months where you're going to get some small flowers, some small artichokes. And or cardoons might work better in your area. You know, just check it out. So the cultivation of artichoke actually does begin with the wild cardoon. It's native to the Mediterranean area. Like I said, it was one of the favorite foods of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Even, 8th century or so, Homer mentioned artichoke. Pliny the Elder mentioned growing, this would be cardoon, cardus in Carthage. In North Africa, it's probably about where it kind of came from, was the North African region up into Mediterraneans. Uh, cult, uh, Various archaeological digs have found that it was widely grown in the Roman period. It was very popular in ancient Egypt. It just made its way into the Greek and Roman herbal medicine. Dioscorides had a nice little mention of artichoke in De Materia Medica. He actually recommended the root, using the root medicinally to get rid of the bad smell in the armpits and the rest of the body, applied to the body after being boiled in wine and taken as a drink, which draws out much stinking. He said it would draw out much stinking through the urine. So, hey, I've never tried artichoke root for that reason, but if you're a person that has a particular issue with body odor, maybe take Dioscorides' advice. Boil the root in some wine, apply it topically, and take it internally. He said that the rest of the plant, the edible parts, of course, could be boiled like asparagus and eaten as a vegetable. And Miss Grieve, in her Modern Herbal, 1931, she summarized a lot of history. Her two books, A Modern Herbal, are still about the best books ever written on herbal medicine, including my own, by the way. No, hers are far superior to anyone's. She said that the artichoke is one of the world's oldest cultivated vegetables, grown by the Greeks and Romans in the heyday of their power. It was introduced into England in the 16th century, both as a vegetable and as an ornamental plant in monastery gardens. So it was brought to England by the monastic medicine, that would be the Benedictines. And like I said, England is not exactly a hot place. If they could grow it in England in a monastery garden, we're not talking a hothouse or a greenhouse here. Yeah, you can probably grow it just about anywhere you live if you are a little flexible and willing to work with it. John Parkinson, who was the greatest English herbalist, he was the king's personal herbalist. He was one of the few Catholics not to be executed for not swearing allegiance to the Anglican Church. He would not renounce Catholicism, and he was such a great physician and doctor that he was allowed to keep his head. That's quite something. I mean, even St. Thomas, or then Sir Thomas More, the greatest law scholar, the greatest legal scholar and lawyer of the entire British Empire from day one to the present day, was beheaded for refusing to renounce the Pope and become Anglican. John Parkinson was not. That's how well he was respected. He said that the head of this plant, which he called scalamus, which is artichoke, is most pleasant being boiled or eaten raw, but chiefly when it is in flour, as also the inner substance of the heads are eaten. Has a delicate flavor. It contains little nutritive matter. I am not exactly sure to what he's referring to as the inner substance. Like I said, we don't eat the choke because the choke of the artichoke, that's the thistle inside, can actually choke you. I think he probably meant the inner part of the stem, like you would with cardoon, peeled and eaten. Now, we usually use the maybe say, what, 3 inches below the artichoke itself. We peel that part of the stem and use it. And since that time, of course, we've had phytochemistry and everything, and people have found it to be very nutritive, actually. So he was mistaken in that regard. But that shows in 1640, the artichoke was a popular vegetable and medicinal, being recommended by the very top doctor in England, the king's own personal physician. Tournefort, 1730, said the artichoke is well known at the table, and he referred to the choke as the floret and the chaffy substance inside being the pappus. So at that point, they differentiated in that. We don't get quite that technical these days. He said the French and Germans both boil the heads as we do, but the Italians generally eat them raw with salt and pepper. There's actually a great tradition in an Italian Jewish neighborhood, what they call the old ghettos of Italy, where they do fried artichokes, which are really traditional, but you can also do a variation that is sort of brushed with oil and grilled. And I like them both. It's one of the most famous foods of the Italian ghettos, very traditional. At times, the Jews in those areas were like almost surviving on artichokes and a few other foods, and they learned to cook them incredibly well. So if you like to grill as I do, and you like to cook outside, you're not going to regret that. That's another way. Like, you know how fresh corn is absolutely the best if you grill it with the husk still on? Maybe people don't know this. Let me tell you my secret to the best, the best corn ever, okay? First of all, when you pick into your corn, those sugars immediately start to turn to starch. The fresher the corn is, the sweeter the corn is. You pick that corn, and as quickly as you can get it off the stalk, do not husk it, do not worry about the silks or anything. Put it directly on a grill and cook it. You can also put it in an oven, just roast it in an oven for 15 or 20 minutes. Some people prefer to do it in the microwave. Well, a few times a microwave oven is acceptable, but I think you're still going to be much happier if you put it on the grill or in an oven and just roast it. Roast it through. You don't want to overcook corn. After that, just pull the silk straight out, peel the husks back, and tie them in a knot so you can then use the husks as a handle. You can then put some butter on it and eat it just like that right off the cob, or you can cut it off the cob into a bowl, mix in some butter and some salt. I love to put some Creole seasoning in there sometimes. That is corn perfection. Some of that Mexican cheese, what Cojillo cheese or something, that's really good on there. You pull those stalks back, you put the cheese on there, put it back on the grill, let the cheese melt down a little bit. Oh yeah, that's good stuff. A little chili powder, ancho chili powder. So anyway, that's how good corn is. You can do the same thing with the artichoke, and the flavor is just intense. It's just fantastic. Have it with a little olive oil and just, I mean, go to town. Some salt. You're not going to regret do having a little experiment with that on the grill. Trust me. The British herbalist John Gerard also wrote a lot of the artichoke, and he also agreed with Dioscorides, saying that it helped reduce body odor. He also said it stayeth the involuntary courses of the natural seed, either in man or woman. So I'm thinking he's saying it reduced menstruation and helped a man retain his essence, we'll say. It's kind of hard to read into, some of this Elizabethan writing. We have to guess at a few things. He says some write that the buds of young artichokes be first steeped in wine and eaten. They provoke urine and stir up the lust of the body. He was saying that it was a diuretic and an aphrodisiac. So who knows? I cannot say I have experienced any of the sort when eating artichokes, but except finding them very, very tasty. And like Dioscorides, he said, I find, moreover, that the root is good against the rank smell of the armholes, that means the armpits, if when the pith is taken away, the same root be boiled in wine and drunk, for it sendeth forth plenty of stinking urine, whereby the rank and rammish savour of the whole body is much amended. So if you have a and rammish, rank and rammish savor of the body, if you smell like a billy goat, you might want to try that remedy. Now, Nicholas Culpeper, who was a character in his own right, he always wanted to associate various astrological forces with his herbs. He said it was under the dominion of Venus, meaning it was a more feminine herb. And he said, therefore, it is no marvel if they provoke the lust, as indeed they do, being a somewhat windy meat, and yet they stay the involuntary course of natural seed in man, which is commonly called nocturnal pollution. And here I care not greatly if I quote a little of Galen's nonsense in his treatise of the faculties of nourishment. He saith they contain plenty of choleric juice, notwithstanding I can scarcely believe, of which he said is engendered melancholy, and of that melancholy juice thin choleric blood. But to proceed, this is certain, that the decoction of the root boiled in wine, or the root bruised and distilled in wine, is alembic, and being drank purges the urine exceedingly. So, I will not claim to have much of any kind of a clue about what the heck he was talking about in most of that passage. But we are starting to see some patterns, and one of them is definitely the diuretic quality, and that's one of the things that helps prevent the kidney stones and prevent the bladder issues and all that. Also, in the Irish tradition, John Kehoe tells us that artichokes were very popularly grown in Ireland as well. He said artichokes are cleansers and good for jaundice. The leaves, when stamped and applied to the skin, draw out thorns and splinters. See, that's a use I didn't even know about until I started doing this research, that you could use the leaves crushed, pounded up, as a drawing poultice. Tea made of the leaves that grow on the stalk certainly cures the ague, that's a fever, when drank about an hour before the fit approaches and taken 3 or 4 times. It tends to be specifically like a malarial type of fever, but it's would probably have that effect for most viral fevers. And of course, in our era, artichokes are just regarded as a delicious food. They absolutely are. Like I said, artichokes pair incredibly well with butter. Anything with cream. You can use artichokes in your soups. You can make artichoke dips with cream cheese if that's what you want to do. Artichokes are just phenomenal. I do think grilled, they're just fantastic. The traditional French way of, cutting out the top, scooping out the pit, rubbing them down with a little lemon juice, simply basically parboiling them and then eating them with a butter sauce for hollandaise. Really going to have a hard time finding a much better meal than that, especially if you've got some good shellfish with it. Artichoke and crab go so well together. Like I said, artichoke and crawfish is one of my all-time favorites. Shrimp, lobster, scallops, artichoke and scallops, wonderful combination. Artichoke goes excellent with chicken and other fowl. I don't think you can go wrong with artichoke. It's just such an absolutely wonderful food. So now that y'all know it's medicinal, you have many excuses to get this thing growing in your garden. And like I said, they tend to be fairly expensive at the grocery store. I don't think that's necessarily warranted, except that most of them are grown in California and brought in from a long distance away, or they're coming out of Mexico. Uh, give it a try. See if you can find a sunny area that's protected from the wind, that isn't in a frost pocket, and see what you can do. Maybe you can make artichoke or cardoon work for you. Either way, whether you have to buy them or if you can grow them yourself, you can have a phenomenal meal, and a meal that's enhancing your health, a meal that's good for you. Hippocrates famously said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." The more we can incorporate these medicinal herbs into our diet, the more robust health we're going to have, the more resilient we're going to be to viruses and other infections, and the more interesting our meals become. So, you all have an excellent week. Have a great time out there in your spring garden, hopefully. And find me on Twitter if you want to. Remember, all my books, I have 6 books available. They're all on Amazon in paperback, or you can get a PDF directly from me. Go to judsoncarroll.com, JUDSONCARROLL, 2 R's and 2 L's.com, or southernappalachianherbs.blogspot.com. Get in touch with me however you want to find me on social media, or shoot me an email if you have any questions. Remember to check out Prepper Broadcasting for the new show, and I'll see you next week. Have a great one. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.